My Jesus, I love thee, I know.
Who enjoyed singing hymn number 240? One of my favourites, love it. You know, earlier this year, I was in a place in Germany where I couldn't find a Seventh-day Adventist church. So I attended a service in a 13th century Lutheran church. And guess what one of the hymns they sang there was? Reminded me, this is all God's world, isn't it? No matter where we go, we're in God's presence, aren't we? And singing that hymn reminded me of that. Now, children, would you like to come out here this morning? Righto. Who here has a dog? Who's got a dog? Okay, thanks. Now, I've got a dog and his name's Rusty. And he's a really good dog. Really good dog. Use him for cattle and he's a great pet. But do you know he's got a bad habit? On a hot day, he likes to go and dig a hole in the garden and lie in it. Probably because it's cool. Now, I've explained to him the problem. And I've told him he should never do it. And guess what? He does it again. No matter how many times I tell him, he does it again. What was that? That's right. He is a dog. And when I explain to him why he shouldn't do it and tell him not to, I am treating him like a human. That's right. But he is a dog. Now, does it make a difference that the fact he's a dog? When he's hot, he wants to cool off. So what's he go and do? Now, is he being naughty or is he just being a dog? That's right, he's just being a dog. Now, if I was feeling hot and I went and dug a hole in the garden and lay in it, would that be the same? Why not? I'm a human and I should have, what was that word again? Common sense. That's right. As people, we're a bit different to dogs, aren't we? Now, when God made dogs, can anyone tell me how God made dogs? Any suggestions? How did God make dogs? He said a word and the dogs were made. You're quite right. He spake and it happened. Now, how did God make people? Yes? He made them out of the dust of the earth. Were they made differently to dogs? Righto, we were made differently to dogs. And you know, God also made a very big difference. Now, when my dog goes and digs a hole in the garden and lies in it, he's not being naughty, even though I've told him he shouldn't do it. What was that? He is just being a dog. However, if I was to do it, I would be being... That's right, because I'm a human and I should know better, because when God made me, he put something in between my ears. What is it? He gave me a brain. And do you know, some animals only have small brains. Like you think how little a chook's brain must be in its little head. And that explains why guinea fowls are so dumb too, because you look at the size of their heads. But he gave us a good-sized brain to think with, didn't he? And he wants us to use, what was that you said before? Yes, he wants us to use sense. Now, if we do the wrong thing, is it different to when a dog does the wrong thing? Yes, because we should know better, shouldn't we? Can we expect the dog to know better? No, that's right. However, because of that, did you know there's someone who always comes and they will say, hey, psst, do the wrong thing. Now, they won't say do the wrong thing. They'll say, hey, this looks like fun, do it. And they might come and they might speak into our mind, or they might get one of our friends to say it to us. And who's that?
Satan.
That's right, that's Satan. He wants us to do the wrong thing, doesn't he? Yeah, but you know, we're not like dogs. We just don't automatically do things like we're dogs. We can, what do we do inside our heads? Use our brain. We call it think, don't we? We think about these things. And you know, if we think about these things, we will realise that what's being suggested is the wrong thing. And because we've got a brain, if the wrong thing is suggested to us, we can say, hey, that's the wrong thing. I'm not going to do it, can't we? Because we know all these suggestions to do the wrong thing, who do they come from?
Satan.
By the way, what do we call them? What was that? Temptations. That's right, you're on the ball here. You know this. However, we're not like dogs, are we? We can think about these things. And what do we say to temptations in one word?
No.
That's right. And so when you're tempted, I want you to remember, we're not like dogs. God made us. He made us special, you're right. And He gave us His brain because He wants us to love Him and follow Him. And so that's why He made us the way we are. So next time the devil comes and tempts you, what are you going to say?
No.
That's right. And I want you to remember, we can say no because we are much smarter than... That's right. Now, to remind us that we are smarter than dogs, I thought this was a really cute picture. A dog with some puppies. What do you reckon? So I want you to colour in this and remember, we are smarter than dogs. When the devil tempts us, we say...
No.
That's right. Now, who'd like to colour this picture in? I hope I've got enough. Okay, there's one for you. One for you. One for you. One for you. There we are. Did you have your hand up? Yep. And one more. You'd like it. Okay. Now, who needs some colouring in pencils to colour in? Okay, put your hands up. And I've got some colouring in pencils here. Hands up. Okay. Let's remember. 1. There you are. 2. 3. There you are. Do you want some? And hang on, I've got another set here. I saw another hand up. And who had their hand up over the back here? You need a set. And you too. Righto. And there we are. Okay, can you go back to your seats now? Do you want some? Okay. And you know where to leave them at the end of the church service? There you are, mate. And you want some? Okay. There's only a few in this one, but anyway. There we go. Right. Now back to your places. Back we go.
Our next hymn is 245, More About Jesus. Let's all stand and sing. More about Jesus I would know, more of His saving flow, more of His saving Jesus, let me learn more of His holy will discern. Spirit of God, my teacher be, showing the things of Christ to me. More about Jesus. More about Jesus. Fullness see, more of His love who died for me. More about Jesus in His word, holding communion with my Lord, hearing His voice in every line, making each faithful saying mine. More about Jesus. More about Jesus. More of His saving fullness see, more of His love who died for me. More about Jesus on His throne, riches in glory all His own. More of His kingdom sure increase, more of His coming Prince of Peace. More about Jesus. More about Jesus. More of His saving fullness see, more of His love who died for me.
Well, good morning again, everybody. Again, everybody? Much better. Righto. Now, did you know there is a book in the Bible which completely changed my view of the world and of life? When I read it, it completely changed the way I see that life should be lived in the world. And I was pretty impressed that a book of the Bible could have such a powerful impact because it completely changed my thinking. Now, I'd read the book in the King James Version, and I had looked at it, for the idea where you use text to, to prove a point, such as, for the living know that they shall die, but the dead know nothing. But when I read it in a modern English translation, I could see in it something really profound. And the book was, everybody should know it, Ecclesiastes. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know nothing. That's from Ecclesiastes. That's right. And the book was Ecclesiastes. But the problem is, I had to look at some commentaries on the book of Ecclesiastes, and so many of them saw it as expressing a negative or pessimistic outlook. And, I felt that was a very shallow outlook on the book itself. But I did notice that they all quoted from a certain writer by the name of Leupold. And when they wanted to explain what words meant, they always quoted from this fellow Leupold. And I just picked up that he must know a fair bit about Ecclesiastes. And one day I was in a second-hand bookshop, and guess what? There I saw a water-damaged copy, second-hand, of Leupold's book, and because it was water-damaged, it was only $8. So I bought it. And I thought, well, if everybody's quoting him, maybe he knows a bit about it. And when I started reading his book, I found some very interesting things, and I found out why they were quoting him. For instance, when he's talking about the style of writing in the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, Others speak of the apt and marvellously skillful style. The latter claim is the one we share, as our exposition will demonstrate. The author's thoughts are expressed with amazing exactitude. New constructions are employed. Participles are handled with a deftness that challenges our admiration. On the whole, his style is a very adequate vehicle for expressing his very helpful counsel. So how did he see the book of Ecclesiastes? As very helpful counsel. And I thought, well, this fits in better with it being such a profound book. And that was one point I got from him. And the other point I got from him, which was equally important, was he talks about the expression under the sun. If you've read Ecclesiastes, have you noticed it uses the expression under the sun quite frequently? Here's what he says about it. Few interpreters have understood it rightly. Hardly any have applied it consistently. In it lies the corrective for the extravagant views that Koheleth, the author, seems to utter. That's the title of the author, by the way, and that's what the original title of the book of Ecclesiastes was. It must always be borne in mind that by the use of this phrase, the author rules out all higher values and spiritual realities and employs only the resources and gifts that this world offers. The use of this phrase is equivalent to drawing a horizontal line between earthly and heavenly realities and leaving out of consideration all that is above the line, that is to say, all higher values. So when he uses the expression under the sun, what he's saying is, if we leave out God and all his values, this is what we have. And when you look at it like that, it's not pessimistic. No, it is just realistic and gives a lot of very helpful counsel. Now, one thing I found in the book, though, boy, these theological books can be very difficult to understand. Like when he explained why the Hebrew word meant such and such, straight over my head. But at least I got what the word meant. And so I'd like to look at this book today. And look, first of all, could we open to the very beginning, as the song says? Let's start at the very beginning. Doesn't anyone know that phrase? A very good place to start. So let's go to chapter 1, shall we? And look, have a look at what it says here, because really the book immediately poses a question. Verses 2 and 3. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? When it says vanity, it means nothingness. And when it says vanity of vanities, it is saying the superlative degree of nothingness. Notice what he's saying? The ultimate degree of nothingness, says the preacher. The ultimate degree of nothingness, all is nothing. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under... What was that again? He does under the sun. In other words, what advantage does man have in all his work which he does if he leaves out, in one word, God? If he leaves God out, what reward does he have? What's in it for him? It's just nothing. And so that is setting the scene for what this book is all about. Now, if you notice in chapter 1, there is a contrast in verses 4 to 8. It says, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place rises there again. Blowing toward the south, then turning toward the north, the wind continues swirling along, and on its circular courses the wind returns. All the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where rivers flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Notice, he's talking about the world, and he says, when we come to the world goes on forever. You know, you have morning and evening. You have the seasons as the winds change. And I thought it was interesting, his explanation of the water cycle. The rivers flow into the sea, the water evaporates and goes back to where they start again, which I think is very interesting knowledge for something that was written so long ago. And then you notice when it speaks of nature, it's talking about all of nature, the world, is ordered. It works in regular cycles. It's operating the way God has set it to operating. But notice what it says about people. A generation comes and a generation goes. And then verse 8, all things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. Notice the contrast there. With human beings, there's all this turmoil. Human beings are fighting each other. Human beings are worrying. Human beings... Can you see the contrast with the natural world that is under God's control and the world of humanity, where we have all these things going on? There's all this turmoil. There's all this trouble. There's all this worry. And the question is, why is there this difference? So anyway, he then sets out to investigate why the human situation is the way it is. And luckily, the person doing the investigation had the resources to do it. Let's have a look at chapter 2 and verse 1. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, I beg your pardon? It was also, futile. It was also vanity. It was also nothingness. Actually, that's, He tried pleasure and he tried entertainment. And he found pleasure and entertainment, really, they offered him nothing. However, he had the resources to try more. Verse 4, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I acquired heaps of material possessions. Maybe this is the answer to life. Maybe this is what it was about. Not so good. But that's all right. He doesn't give up. If we go down to verse 8, also I collected for myself silver and gold and all the treasures of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men. He tried money, wealth, and everything money could buy. Was it the answer? No, again he found under the sun this offered him nothing. And so in verse 10 he sums it up. And all that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labour, and this was my reward for all my labour. And verse 11, thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labour which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity, nothing, and chasing after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Notice, he had all these things which we value in the world, all these things which, let's face it, I wouldn't mind having a few of them. Who here would feel bad if you had wealth? Not me. I wouldn't mind a bit more of it. Who would mind? Who would like a few more material possessions? Me. I don't think I'm on my own there. But he pursued all these to a degree which I can never pursue them. And he found that under the sun, they were nothing but emptiness and chasing after the wind. Have you ever tried chasing the wind? I have. These little dust devils you see going around? I like to run over and stand in them. It's something I did as a child, and I guess it's something that's never left me. But you know what? You chase after them, and what do? As soon as you stand in them, they just move on, and you could chase them forever and never catch them, couldn't you? You can never catch them and hold on to them. Now, another thing he thought he'd try, something which is really more valuable. Go to verse 12. So I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. For what will the man do who will come after the king except what has already been done. So he decided to try wisdom. Is wisdom the answer? And one of the things he tells us in the next verse is that he found that wisdom was better than foolishness, but it didn't provide the answer that he was looking for. Verse 15, then I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why then have I been extremely wise? So I said to myself, this too is... You would think maybe wisdom offered the answer. Today, don't we see education as the answer to many problems, to many issues? We see it as the way of making the world a better place. More education for all. Well, do you know, in the 1940s, there was a nation set about exterminating another nation. Men, women, children and babies, just because they didn't like them. And it was the best educated nation in the world that did it. It was the best educated nation in the world that implemented the Holocaust. So maybe these things aren't the answer. Now, when we read these things, it seems that we have an argument for a rather deprived life, doesn't it? You know, this almost fits in with the medieval monks. You know how they used to go and lock themselves in monasteries and, you know, take vows of poverty and obedience and this sort of thing and make sure they didn't enjoy life and clothe themselves in uncomfortable clothes and sleep in wintertime without blankets. It almost seems that that is what this is saying, because he's saying, wealth, how did he find it? Vanity. Material possessions, how did he find them? Vanity. Everything he tried, he found vanity. So does this mean we should give up on these things and lock ourselves away? And I have actually heard arguments that the Christian life should be a deprived and poor life. No, that is not what he is saying. The only reason people think that is because they misunderstand which phrase? Under the sun, leaving God out of the equation. And I would like to suggest, leaving God out of the equation, what value to us are material possessions? They are meaningless. Leaving God out of the equation, what value is wealth? Nothing. You see, under the sun, what he says there is right. However, what he's saying is, these are not the answers to the essential emptiness of a life lived under the sun. And then he moves to chapter 3. Let's have a look at chapter 3. Now, who here was a teenager or in their 20s in the 1960s? Could I see your hands? Teenagers or in their 20s in the 1960s? There's a few people around nearly as old as me. Okay. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Have you heard of it? Do you remember that song by the group The Birds, Turn, Turn, Turn? Who remembers that song? To everything... good, someone the same age as me. To everything there is a season. These were the words of a very popular song. But I want to have a look at verse 1, shall we? There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. And then it says a time to be born, a time to die, a time to laugh, and a time to weep. And those were the words of the song. But notice it says there is what sort of a time? An appointed time. Notice when it says an appointed time, appointed, who appointed it? Let's go to verse 11. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, yet so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. Who is in control of time? What's he saying? There is an appointed time for everything. God is in control of time. And so that's the point he is making. God is in control of this world. And if God is in control of this world and we leave him out of our reasoning, can you see we are facing a problem? How many of you, when you are following a recipe, would leave half the ingredients out and expect to get the thing that you are seeking? Would you expect to get the thing that you are seeking? If God is in control of this world and we leave him out, how can we expect to find anything? Okay. He sums up the world when you leave God out of it in chapter 10 and verse 19. And I think this sums it up. Men prepare a meal for enjoyment, and wine makes life merry, and money is the answer to everything. If you leave God out, is that correct? Because you don't have anything else, do you? And is it any wonder that people think this if they are leaving God out of the equation? Now, okay. Notice the difference with God in back to chapter 3 in verses 12 and 13. I know there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labour, because it is... Where does happiness come from? It is a gift of God. Where does satisfaction come from? It is a gift of God. Can you see the point he's making? Hey, do you agree with that point? Let's have a look at it. Now, look, I'd like to use the example of money to show what the writer of Ecclesiastes is actually saying. Could we turn to chapter 5? We already saw in chapter 2 the mention of money, but if we could go to chapter 5. Now let's have a look at verses 10 and 13. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. It is nothingness. Go to verse 13. There is a grievous evil which I have seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. Now that sounds like an argument against wealth and money, doesn't it? But look, let's go to verse 15. As he had come naked from his mother's womb, so will he return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labour that he can carry in his hand. If I was to devote my life to working just for money, and I was by some quirk of accident, because I think I lack the ability here, if I was able to make myself very wealthy, there comes a time when I will die, and how much of that wealth will I take with me? Absolutely none. Look, you could go to the cemetery where Australia's richest man, Kerry Packer, is buried. Does he have any advantage over the poorest person buried in that cemetery? So in the long run, if I was to devote my life to the pursuit of money, what would it benefit me in the end? I would be just as dead as everyone else, wouldn't I? Right. And that's the point that he is making. But can we go to verses 18 and 19? Here is what I have seen to be good and fitting, to eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself in all one's labour, in which one toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him. For this is his reward. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labour. This is a gift of... See the difference? Is there a criticism of being rich there? No. The problem is when one is rich under the sun, leaving God out of the equation. But if one has this relationship with God, what does God do? He gives them the power to enjoy their wealth. Can you see the difference? What's making the difference? In one word. In one word, the difference is God. And that's the point he's making. God gives. And elsewhere, we find it's the same with the other things he mentioned in chapter 2. While he tried them under the sun and found them nothing, when he tries them with God, guess what he discovers? He discovers the joy that is the gift of God. You see, It's all about priority. Could we go to verses 1 and 2 of chapter 5? Guard your steps as you go to the house of God, and draw near to listen, rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know they are doing evil. Do not be hasty in word or impulsive in thought to bring up a matter in the presence of God, for God is in heaven and you are on earth, therefore let your words be few. Can you see the priority? When we come into the presence of God, it's all about God. When we're under the sun, it's all about us, isn't it? It's all about us. Can you see the difference in priorities? When you come into the presence of God, do not be hasty or impulsive, because you are in the presence of a God who is in heaven. Okay, let's have a look at chapter 3 and verse 17. I said to myself, God will judge both the righteous man and the wicked man, for a time for every matter and for every deed that is there. You see, this comes out very clear in the advice to young people, what is meant by this priority. And when he gives advice to young people, look, if we could go over to chapter 9. No, sorry, chapter 11. Chapter 11. Didn't read my own writing there. Chapter 11, and could we have a look at verses 9 and 10? Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow your impulses, the impulses of your heart, and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. Who's noticed that? That youth is somewhat fleeting. You're having fun and it's gone before you realise it, isn't it? Before you appreciate it. But notice what he says here. Do the things that you enjoy. Enjoy your childhood. Make the best of it. When you're young, really enjoy it. But remember, when you are choosing to do something, are you happy for that to be brought into judgment before God one day? What do you reckon? Is that good advice? I think back to when I was young. I think if I had thought, would I be happy for this to be brought in judgment before God? I think I might have done a few things differently. Anyone else of the same ilk? Right, but can you see the point? What is God saying? Is he saying sit around and be serious all the time? What is he telling young people to do there? Enjoy life. Enjoy being young, but just keep this in mind. Do you like the sense of priorities there? It's not avoid enjoyable things. Enjoy yourself, but just keep the priorities right. Remember, you'll be brought into judgment for everything one day before God. If you bear that in mind, you'll be right. And I believe that's not just advice for young people. I believe it is good for all ages. If before we do something we decide, am I willing to face judgment for it? But apart from that, hey, don't sit around worrying about it. Just get out there and do what with life? Enjoy it. I like that message, don't you? And that's what it's about. It's good advice. However, there is one aspect in the book which worries a lot of people and leads so many people to say, oh, it's a negative book, it's so pessimistic. And look, could we go to chapter 9 and have a look at it? Chapter 9 and verses 1 to 3. For I have taken all this to my heart and explain it that righteous men, wise men and their deeds are in the hand of God. Would you agree with that? Righteous people, those who do the things of God, they are in God's hand. I like that illustration. But then he says, man does not know whether it will be love or hatred, anything awaits him. And this one worries people. It is the same for all. There is one fate for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good and for the clean and for the unclean. for the man who offers a sacrifice and for the one who does not sacrifice. As the good man is, so is the sinner. As the swearer is, so is the one who is afraid to swear. And verse 3, this is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that there is one fate for all men. Furthermore, the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil, and insanity is in their hearts throughout their lives. Afterwards they go to the dead. And a lot of people worry when he says, hang on, there's one fate awaiting the righteous and the wicked. And he even elaborates on that further. Could we go back to chapter 3 and verse 17? No, 19 and 20, of chapter 3. All go to the same place, all come from the dust, and all return to the dust. Who knows that the breath of a man ascends upward and the breath of the beast descends downward to the earth? So not only is he saying that the righteous and the wicked meet the same fate, but even their cat does the same thing as well. Now, does that sound extreme and pessimistic? No. Do you know there are cemeteries in this world where if I wanted to be, I could be buried next door to my cat? And why could I be buried next door to my cat? Because we're in the same place, aren't we? And he is talking about where? Whereabouts is it? Under the sun. And answer me this. If I leave God out of my life, I leave God out of everything I do, is my future any better than that of my cat? It isn't, is it? It's no better. You see, that's the point. Is he saying something pessimistic or is he stating a truth? He is stating a truth. But could we go to chapter 9 again? Chapter 9, and have a look at verses 7 to 9. Now look what he's saying. Let your clothes... 7. Go then, eat your bread in happiness and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life and in your toil in which you have laboured under the sun. Hang on. What is God saying to the people who have a relationship with him? What's he saying about life? Enjoy it, but notice what he's saying. He's saying, go then, eat your bread in happiness and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. He's saying God has approved what we are doing. Who's he talking to here? Isn't he talking to those who keep God as part of their life, who have a relationship with God? How is it then God can approve all their works when they're sinners? How is it God can approve all their works when they commit sins? How can that happen? Because if I have a relationship with God, what's happened to my sins? They are forgiven, and when they are forgiven, they are also... So what are the only ones of my works that God remembers? The ones that I didn't need to repent of, the good ones, the ones that didn't need forgiveness. Can you see? If I put God into my life, I keep God in my life, I have a strong relationship with God, my sins are, what's that word again? Forgiven and forgotten. So God approves of the works of my life, doesn't he? Can you see the point he's making here? Your sins are forgiven. But if I don't have a relationship with God, what's my future? Any better than that one of my cat? That's right. Under the sun, I and my cat would have the same future. You see, I don't believe that's negative. Tell me, is that negative or is that truth? That's truth. He is describing, he says, under the sun, there is injustice, there is suffering, there is illegal behaviour. Is he correct? That's right. There is unfairness. That may sound negative, but if I say anything else, I'll be tampering with the truth, won't I? Now, when he considered all this, when he evaluated all this, what was his conclusion? And I love his conclusion, actually. Remember, he said to young people at the beginning of chapter 12, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. And let's go down to verses 6 to 8. Notice what it says. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed, the pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. In other words, remember God. Don't leave it till you're dying. And notice what it says there. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Under the sun, what hope do I have then if I leave it too late to have a relationship with God? It's all dust, isn't it? Me and the cat, both dust, right? Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. At that time in life, what's my wealth worth to me? What are my material possessions worth to me? What is worldly wisdom worth to me? What's it all worth to me? Nothing. The only thing that counts is, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Before this, it's the relationship with my Creator, isn't it? When I die, I can't take many things with me. I go out of this life as I came into it with nothing. Not quite true. I can go out of my life with a relationship with God. Okay, there's a verse here that I love and I have to read it. But beyond this, my son, be warned, of writing many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Anyone in the senior years of high school? Is too much devotion to books wearying to the body? I like the way the King James says it, is weariness to the bones. But let's have a look at the conclusion to this in verses 13 and 14. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God. And by fear God, it means respect God, reverence God. Give him the place in your life that truly belongs to him. Make him the first priority in your life. Fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. But the good news is, if I have a relationship with God, what is all that's going to be brought to view? It's that which is good, isn't it? Because that which is evil is what? Forgiven and forgotten. Here is the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is the most important thing in our lives, and it is that relationship that gets us out from under the sun and puts us in a position for God's blessings. And you think about it. If I put God first in everything, will wealth be a problem to me? Will it cause me any problems? If I put God first in everything, will material possessions be a trap for me? No, they won't. If I put God first in everything, will worldly wisdom be a problem for me? Fear God and keep his commandments. Trust and obey, for this is the whole duty of man.
Thank you, Brother Rob. We will now close our service by singing the words of hymn number 249. will guide his children in his arms. He carries them all day long. Praise him, tell of his excellent greatness. Praise him, ever in joyful song. Praise him, Jesus our blessed Redeemer. For our sins he suffered and bled and died. He our rock, our hope of eternal salvation. Praise him, hail him, Jesus the crucified. Sound his praises, Jesus who bore our sorrows. Love unbounded, wonderful, deep and strong. Praise him, tell of his excellent greatness. Praise him, ever in joyful song. Praise him, Jesus our blessed Redeemer. And immortals, down with hosannas ring. Jesus, Savior, reigning forever and ever. Crown him, prophet and priest and king. Christ is coming, over the world victorious. Power and glory unto the Lord belong. Praise him, tell of his excellent greatness. Praise him, ever in joyful song.
Actually, the Book of Ecclesiastes completely changed my view of Christianity. The Christian life is to be enjoyed, isn't it? That's what it's about. It's about having a better, a happier, a more joyous life, summed up in one word. It's all about, Christianity is all about, exactly. It's not about me, it's about him, isn't it? A different priority. And if it's about him, isn't the life and the pleasure we have a blessing from him? And doesn't he bless us more than we deserve? So shouldn't we be the happiest people of all time? And that's the message of Ecclesiastes. Let's not live our lives under the sun. Let's have that relationship with God that it was all about. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for your word, because in your word we can see what a wonderful God we serve. A God who loves us, who cares for us, and wants to give us the best of everything. Lord, help us never to lose that relationship with you, because nothing can be as great as having a relationship with you. Nothing in this world can compare to it, and everything else without that is just vanity. Amen.